You're watching The Ready Writer, a show where I get to speak to writers of all different genres, mediums, and experiences. The Ready Writer. Are you ready? Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Ready Writer. I'm your host, Casey Bell, and today's guest is author of The Wonders of the Peculiar Parasol, Mark Even. Let's get this interview started. Okay, when was the first time you can remember you writing?
Wow. Um, well, I've always been somewhat creative with stories. I remember my wife going to college, and she had a creative writing class, and she'd have these. We were just dating then, but she had these assignments to come up with stories to depict a certain style of writing or a certain kind of thing. Um, uh, and she was struggling with that. So I'd write and create the story for her, and then she'd rewrite it and edit it to make it look like her teacher wanted. So that's probably the first time I can remember that I really did that kind of writing. But then, I worked for IBM for 40 years and did some creative marketing writing. I developed marketing materials. I wrote some scripts for marketing videos and things like that. So, but I never thought of myself as a writer. But then after I retired, I had this idea um, to maybe write something for my grandchildren, and was toying with one idea or another until finally my brother's daughter, my niece, told me an idea of a book that she had, and that was the spark for this book, The Wonders of the Peculiar Parasol. She had gone to a wedding in Italy. She was living in Kosovo at the time, and at this wedding there were a bunch of little children, and she had a son, and so she was playing with them at the reception, and she came up with this idea that if a kid was holding an umbrella, it would whisk them away to some fantasy world, and then they would come right back, and they had to tell a story to everyone else about where they went and what they did. And so she described that one little girl said, "Oh, I went to England and had tea with the Queen," and another little boy said, "I was a deep sea diver and talked with an octopus," and that was her idea of having this magical umbrella, and that these children would go away to these faraway lands. So that was the spur. That was the spark of the idea for the book.
That was actually going to be my next question. To tell us about your book and the inspiration behind it. What was your publishing process like? Did you have any idea of how to publish prior to, or did you have to learn on the way?
No, not at all. Completely naive about the whole publishing process. Um, when I first wrote the book, I actually wrote it as three little short stories, thinking this is just for my grandchildren. And then I started showing it to my brothers and my sisters and my wife and some friends. And one of my friends sent it to his 11-year-old grandson, sent the three short stories. And I got feedback from him that he loved it, but he thought it should be one book. So I kind of rewrote it into one book, kind of creating chapters to build the three short stories together. And then I was encouraged by that same friend, um, the grandfather of that little boy, to publish it because he had published a book himself. And so I went through the process of trying to find a publisher, and I finally got, using the internet, I finally got a response from a publisher up in Minneapolis. I live near Rochester, Minnesota, and and she gave me some feedback. Said it needed a lot of work. Thought the story was interesting, but that she wouldn't take it on to publish it, and suggested I, work with an editor and also work with maybe a literary agent. And so, using the internet again, I found an editor who helped me with some things. Some things I didn't understand what she was trying to tell me, like point of view. I didn't understand point of view when I first wrote this. And then I reached out to literary agents that I found via the internet, and literally didn't get a single response from a literary agent. Most of them said, if you don't hear back from me, we're not interested. A lot of them sent back a boilerplate, no thank you. And none of them really reached out in any way. So I was going to self-publish, and went through the process of working with Amazon to self-publish. And I posted on LinkedIn, because I'm not a Facebook person, that I was going to do this, and one of my LinkedIn contacts is the owner of Crestine Wave Publishing, because he and I used to work together many years ago at IBM. And he reached out, and within 2 weeks, he said he wanted to publish my book. So that's kind of by pure chance did I locate a publisher. And now they're working on publishing the second book of the series. I ended up writing 4 books of these characters, and they're working on the editing of the second book, and which should be out, this year sometime yet.
What was the response to those who had read the original stories you wrote? Because you said it was a lot of editing. Did they get the actual book that was published, and what was their response to the 2 separate versions?
Whose response? To the publishers?
No, the children who read it the first before you got it published.
Oh, they love the idea. The little boy, the grandson of my friend, he really enjoyed it. The book is about these 3 cousins who discover this magical parasol. They don't even know what a parasol is. They called it an umbrella. And they discover it in their great-grandmother's attic while they're playing hide and seek. And its magical powers kick in when they touch it. And the great-grandmother had experienced it as well, and she'd forgotten all about it. And so these children, one at a time, go away to a faraway place and experience a fantasy world. And in the real world, while they're holding the parasol, they're frozen in time. They can't move. Nobody can move them. They weigh a ton. They're just stuck doing whatever they're doing. Mid-sentence, walking, sitting, playing, jumping. They're just stuck. But they're not gone for very long, even though the experience that they're having magically is maybe taking a full day. They're only gone and frozen for a couple of minutes. And while they're in this magical world, they learn that they are witches and wizards. That they have magic powers, that the umbrella and the dragon stone that's on the parasol triggers their ability to use magic. And it gets them into trouble. And there's obviously an evil witch that they encounter, and they have to find their way out of trouble and save their family who is in danger because of the evil witch. So he really liked the stories, and just having an 11-year-old confirm that it was enjoyable, and he's quite the voracious reader. Read all the Harry Potter books and all that. that kind of inspired me to try to get it published.
Okay. So you've written for a long time, but you've never intended on publishing a book. So when you received that book in your hand for the first time, what was your reaction?
Oh, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I had to, since I was going to originally self-publish, I had to get art done. We have a drawing at the beginning of each chapter, and of course the cover had to be drawn. So I found a local artist in Rochester, and it was fun collaborating with her and getting the art done, and getting my hands on the art, which was exciting. The names of all the characters in the book are of my children or my grandchildren. So each person, important to me and my immediate family is got a character within the book. One of my granddaughters her name is actually used for one of the dragons in the story rather than an actual character. She's excited about that. When all of my grandchildren were given a book, and the first thing they did, because I told them their names were in it, the first thing they did was to leaf through it to find their name. Some of them couldn't even read, but they could identify their name. But yeah, it was very exciting to have a book, have my first book signing, in the town. It's pretty cool.
Okay. So your last question, if you could go somewhere with any author, whether they be dead or alive, who would it be and why, and where would you go?
Oh. Well, I have a number of favorite authors, but the first person that came to mind when you answered that question was Stan Lee from Marvel Comics.
Oh.
I was a comic book fiend when I was a kid. I was a comic book fiend when I was in college, trading comic books with my computer science nerd friends that were in college with me. I even subscribed to comic books after I got married and had comic books just delivered to my house because I didn't go looking for them at stores, but I wanted to get certain issues of certain titles. I think Stan Lee was so creative. He came up with so many different characters and so many different environments, and yet he humanized everyone. His characters weren't like Superman. They're who never had any problems. It was Spider-Man who had all this angst, or adult characters had marriage trouble and fights with their in-laws, and in the meantime they're saving the world. And then if I were to travel with him, I'd want to do a cruise around the world and just be on a cruise ship and be able to pick his brain and talk with him about his characters, about his stories, and about his life. J.K. Rowling would take a real close second to that choice. Stan Lee would be my choice.
Okay.
Most people don't think of him as an author because he's a comic book guy.
Right. Yeah, but that is an author because he has to write storylines.
Yeah.
The Wonders of the Peculiar Parasol chronicles how Mandy Mendez and her extended family learned that they are descendants of an ancient, powerful wizard after discovering an enchanted parasol in their great-grandmother's attic. The Wonders of a Peculiar Parasol by Mark Even. Get it from Amazon today. Well, that is all the time we have for you today on The Ready Writer. I would like to thank our guest, Mark Even, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch another episode of The Ready Writer. Don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day.